Like, comment, share, and subscribe. Hit that notification bell in the upper right-hand corner. Follow me on all forms of social media. Check me out at thatdrummerguy.com and enjoy the following presentation.
Hello, Tim here.
Hi, how's it going?
It's going good. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you very much for taking the time to do this interview.
Oh, no worries, no worries. Yeah, sorry if I was a little late there.
Not a problem. I'm just happy we were able to do this and talk about this brand new album from SPREAKER, Play to Win, which is coming out next Friday through Record Breaking Records.
Yeah, you bet.
So, I've noticed lately, of course, with this being an amazing album, I mean, I love it from start to finish. I love the production, I love the songwriting, and everything that's going on there, but I've also noticed that you guys have been putting out an amazing killer album, like, every single year lately. I mean, how is that feeling for you guys to be able to put out such an amazing album every single year now?
It feels good. I mean, I think a lot of people in the modern music industry, especially, there's kind of there's just the music industry these days is a lot different than it was, say, in the 80s when bands like Maiden or Priest or Metallica were putting out albums every year. So things are a lot different, and I think a big part of that is kind of how people listen to the music, and then on top of that, how labels like to sell the music, which is a huge part. And us being independent, I mean, if we have songs, we'll release them, which is not how it works on, if you're on a label, they don't want to release an album until, they think they've already recouped their investment in a band, or they think that they might by that time, or, they're a lot more focused on the bottom end, we'll call it, and not quite as interested in the art. So we're just able to do whatever we want. And for us, a big thing is we love writing music. I mean, when we get home from a long day of work or whatever, we like to pick up a guitar and just noodle around. I mean, a lot of other people, maybe they watch TV, maybe they go to the gym, maybe they like cooking, I don't know, but we like to make music.
And with that said, I mean, how is that for, like, the chemistry and the inspiration, being able to have all of these songs that, like, every single year?
Well, I think a big part of it is that we're stuck in, like, a tour van for, God, I don't know, thousands of hours a year. It's ridiculous. I think just on this last tour, we just finished a North American tour with Unleash the Archers. It's 5 weeks. I think we probably spent, I don't know, at bare minimum on average 6 hours a day in a vehicle. So, I mean, you spend a lot of time driving around. And one of the best ways to fill that time is putting on some great tunes. And, I mean, we're sort of in the golden age as a music listener. There's so much music, and it's basically available on demand for free. So we just listen to a ton of different music, and I mean, not all of it is metal, that's for sure. We listen to all kinds of weird stuff on the road, and it's a great source of inspiration because, there's so many good ideas out there, but I think a good song is always a good song, and I think sort of what the people, when people put it in certain genres, that's how it goes into genre due to how someone dresses up a song. Like oftentimes you might see the same chord progression in metal, maybe it's the same thing in pop, you might see the same chord progression in a rap song, but it's all in how you dress up those songs. And so if you can kind of deconstruct the song in your head and say, oh, that's a really cool rhythm, or maybe that's a cool key change, something like that, then you can learn to incorporate these other ideas that maybe you're not, maybe they don't get expressed quite that often in regular heavy metal. So it's a lot of fun to listen to all these different things.
Oh yeah, and I can only imagine when you're on the road like that. I mean, when you're surrounded by metal so much, like every night when you're out there playing with metal bands, talking to metal fans, and just constantly talking to metal. I mean, I'm sure it's got to be good for the psyche to be able to switch it off and like put on something else. I mean, whether it's a pop album or a classic rock album or a hip hop album or whatever the case is.
Yeah, totally. I guess it's sort of like sitting in a hot tub all day. After a while, you want to get out of the hot tub, even though it feels good.
And with that said, I mean, of course, just like you mentioned, you were able to do a great extensive tour with Unleash the Archers. How was it to be able to be on a tour just like that?
That tour was great. That was, we're two Canadian bands from Western Canada, and we weren't 100% sure what we might be expecting in some of these places. They had a new booking agent at the time, and like some of these venues we were playing, you know, you look at the advance sheet and you're like, oh geez, this is going to be a weird show. And then we show up and it's sold out. So I think over half the shows were sold out on this tour, which is really amazing. I mean, big shows in places like Chicago. You know, it's really great to go to these big venues and have them sell out. And just the crazy amount of support that we saw on this tour was really amazing. And can't wait to get out there on the road again. And we'll be going to Europe actually, basically in just over a week, and be on tour again with some fellow Canadians, Skullfist. And we'll be on tour for basically all of November. And that should be another really exciting tour, because we actually both have the new album out on the same day, October 26th.
Oh, that's right. And yeah, and I was just going to mention that too. I mean, that's so perfect for both bands to be able to tour such a great metal market like Europe and being able to promote those brand new albums in such perfect timing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, metal in Europe is, it's almost like a different experience than the North American version of, you know, a metal show and what a metal fan is. It's you know, a lot of time in North America, you're playing in these like dingy, weird venues. It's just very underground, I guess. And in Europe, I think there's a much broader appreciation for art as art, and not necessarily art as a commercial good in the United States. And so, for example, in Europe, you know, we've played it a number of times at different places that are government funded, like the venue's actually funded by the government. So, you know, the promoter doesn't have to be like, oh, well, I'm only going to focus on bands that have a certain kind of draw because I need to make money. You know, a venue like that has some government funding, you know, they can take chances on new young bands, and it's a better environment to bring people up in, I think, to help them, you know, get their foot in the door in the industry and stuff like that. So the venues, especially over in Europe, you know, it's like there's showers in the back room. Some of the venues even have like accommodation, like beds and stuff in the back. They feed the artists great. But yeah, it's great. Definitely really looking forward to Europe. I mean, that's where we got our start in terms of touring. I think this is getting close to our 15th tour of Europe. And I think we've only toured the States. I think this was our 5th tour with Unleash the Archers, our 5th tour in the United States. So definitely looking forward back to getting back to Europe.
Yeah, and again, you know, it's so great that you guys are both able to tour behind some magnificent albums. I mean, I also got the new Skullfist album, which is just a phenomenal album as well. And, you know, just being able to celebrate this great style of metal, both of you guys being able to show off these different ranges, but still being able to be yourselves and, you know, just spreading that good word throughout Europe. And, you know, I imagine there's going to be some more great touring that's going to be coming up in 2019 as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We're just booking our next sort of round of tours after this. Looking to go back to Europe, looking to go back to the full North American tour, also looking to get into new markets and, you know, play some new places that we've never played before, like South America, or go down to Australia, places like that. So that's kind of where we're focusing on with this album. We really want to make sure that this is a big, you know, tour the whole world kind of event for us.
Yeah, and that's one thing I definitely noticed with the album. I mean, especially from the production standpoint. I mean, I'm glad that you mentioned that. I mean, it does feel like the kind of album that you do want to be able to tour the world behind. I mean, it just sounds so big and anthemic, everything that's going on there, whether it's going all guns blazing, whether it's a more ballady moment that's going on there. I mean, it's got a little something for everybody that's a metal fan, and I really appreciate that.
Oh, yeah, glad you're digging it. I think with this album, what we tried to do was try and have a little bit of a broader approach. I mean, it's our 6th album, so we've done 5 albums before, you know, and sometimes it gets a little boring writing the same song over and over. And, you know, we have a lot of, you know, like speed metal and stuff like that. And don't get me wrong, those are lots of fun. But it's, especially for us, where we do so much music writing, sort of like going over the same ground over and over. And for this album, we really looked at some of our favorite albums of all time, like like Master of Puppets or some of the Scorpion albums like Blackout or Priest albums, Painkiller, stuff like that, different Maiden albums, all these big, huge albums. And we found that, the big deciding thing about them often was that there was more of this variety, and they, had more songs that were, slower songs. They had more songs that were, of the ballad variety, ballad almost being a bad word in heavy metal. So we decided, hey, that if that's what, these are the classic albums, these are our favorite albums of all time, why don't we try sneaking some of that stuff in? So that's what we tried to do on this album, and I think it worked out pretty good.
Yeah, and I definitely agree, and I always appreciate it when a band does show that kind of variety in there. I mean, rather than feeling like you have to be pigeonholed into one style and not being able to really feel like you can be yourselves, you are able to go and have more ballad songs that are on there, more slower songs, but you also have the faster heavy metal songs that are going on there as well, the great speed metal songs that are going on. So it's good to have that variety throughout an album because it makes you want to listen to it from start to finish.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when we make our albums, we want to make something that, we want good songs individually, but also we want the album to be a good package. We want someone to put it on and listen to it front to back. So, for us, our sort of intended medium or way to listen to the music is on vinyl, because it's you kind of got to listen to the whole thing when you put it on vinyl, you can't just skip a track. So, that we definitely tried to focus on having a good all-around album, and you kind of want to make it like a movie, you got strong introduction, catch the listener's ear, and then, rising action, you got to have plot twists and stuff like that. So that's sort of how we try to plan out our album. And yeah, it's interesting trying with the slower songs, ballads, things like that, softer songs, softer music. Metal is very much that genre with the dudes in the black band t-shirt at the back of the venue with their arms crossed and a scowl on their face. That's the pedigree of heavy metal, with this very anti-poser stuff and who can be the heaviest and most brutal, which is cool. But I feel like at a certain point, when you go that direction, it stops being music and it's just kind of technical noise. And we very much like to focus on the music because, we want to be music. That's what we do. We want to have, long-lasting, successful, and meaningful careers in music. And to do that, you need to actually make music, not just noise.
Yeah, and I agree. And, there are some bands that are out there that can do that technical proficiency, like, so perfectly when it comes to metal and stuff like that. But, it's just like, it's good to have that variety, like we were both talking about, just like being able to play fast and slow. But the important thing, which you touched on, which I think is such a great thing to see that you guys are focusing on, is having those moments where you go and remember what the song is because of like a really hooky chorus or a great intro riff or whatever the case is, just like something that makes you go back and remember the song. Because when you have that in those like a really technical bands, all of it starts to sound the same after a while and you can't really pick and decide what songs are which. But when you do that sparingly into what you guys are doing, you always remember what the songs are, you remember what albums they're on, and you always go back to them.
Yeah, totally. Well, like I mentioned earlier, with us being on tour so much and listening to so much music, we listen to a lot of super technical, ultra brutal, like gurgly, tech death weirdness. And, it's good for, put it on for half an hour, but it's just like a wall of noise. And for us, it's like, it's kind of good for a laugh or whatever. But it's fun music to listen to, but it's not really music. It's more of like entertainment, I guess. And but we want to be firmly in the music camp where it's like, hey, that's a real song. And like I said, we were really looking to the our heavy metal ancestors, so to speak, to and try to understand what really makes good heavy metal. And I think the best metal songs, the most memorable metal songs, the songs that have been the most successful, have always just been good songs. And more than anything, what makes them metal is kind of how they get dressed up. And Holy Diver is a good song, whether it's played on an acoustic guitar or blazing heavy metal guitars. So it's it's really interesting. Like I said, also in the car, we've also listened to all kinds of, there's like these acoustic instrumental covers of heavy metal songs that are almost like music for like yoga playlists or whatever. And it's like, hey, wow, this is a really great song when you strip it down. So that's, it's always interesting to just kind of look a little bit deeper as to what the music is, and that's what we're focusing on.
Oh, absolutely. So, getting back into that touring aspect, I mean, with being able to release so much quality music over the last few years, how hard is it to be able to decide what songs you're going to be able to play live?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, it's kind of interesting. If we were, say, on some sort of label these days, I'm sure that they would be like, no, you're still supporting, your Stand in the Fire album that came out 2 years ago. And so, because I mean, that's the normal touring album cycle these days, I would say, would be 2 years at the fastest, probably closer to something like 3 or 4 years. So, I mean, if you look at it from an industry perspective, I mean, we still have a bunch of Stand in the Fire t-shirts that we're selling on tour. So, all these albums are really fresh, but it's kind of exciting, it's survival of the fittest when it comes to picking songs. We have so many to choose from these days, and which is really nice, but it's really interesting in terms of how the music industry, especially modern technology, is helping to shape what artists choose to do and not do. I mean, for us, our set list for this tour was really guided by things like Spotify and iTunes. We're looking at what are our most popular songs on these kind of platforms, and we also ask people on social media, what's your favorite song? And so sometimes when we play a song, for example, like Too Late, which is off of our Stand in the Fire album, people, the mosh pit shuts down and people just kind of stand there. We always wonder, do people actually like this song? And then, the answer is yes, but they just enjoy it in a different way. And I think when you're in a metal band like us, we grew up with those, angry dudes, the crossed arms and the black band t-shirts, and there's other ways to enjoy music than just scowling or headbanging, So it's great, at least for us, that these different people can enjoy different parts of our sound and our catalog. So it's always really interesting to see the crowd's responses and what works, what doesn't. And sometimes you might think something doesn't work, but it's actually working really well. I mean, on this tour, tons of people were saying, "Oh my God, I can't believe you played that song. I'm so happy. It's my favorite Stryker song." Stuff like that. So it's been really great.
Oh, that's such a great thing to hear that too. And I imagine when the Europe tour comes along as well, I mean, I can imagine that the North American crowd will have a bit of a variance going on with the European crowd as for what their favorite songs are and stuff like that. And it's great to see that you guys are going to be able to be in that position where you can switch up songs like you have.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, I think the Europeans like a little bit more melody, maybe, in their music. They're a little bit more Judas Priest or Iron Maiden, whereas North America is a little bit more Metallica or Megadeth. I think that's kind of a good way to sum it up. The Americans are kind of more rhythm based and a little thrashier and edgier, whereas the Europeans are a little bit more melody based and sort of a little bit more refined and elegant. I think it's just sort of it's almost like a reflection of the culture. I feel that there's a lot more education in the arts, at least for, when people are coming up through grade school, elementary school, whatever. I mean, in Canada, we have good funding for the arts in schools and good education and things like that. So, at least in my elementary school, I'm like 5 years old or whatever, and they start putting instruments in your hands, and you start going, and then you have like school music classes. That was always a thing, and I'm not sure if there's as much support for that kind of education in the States as there is in Europe. So I think a lot of the more primal and visceral kind of music is more popular in the States, and there's a lot more room for the kind of where the more educated music is in Europe, as a very broad difference, in very broad terms, very broad strokes. I think that's maybe a little bit of the difference in, at least heavy metal between Europe and North America.
Oh, absolutely. And again, it's amazing to see like a band like Stryker is able to adapt to both situations like that, whether they're playing the more primal, visceral stuff, whether they're playing the more enlightened stuff of what you can do overseas, and just being able to cater to both sides, still being able to be yourselves, and continue to be able to write quality album after quality album, and being able to tour behind it and get along with these great, amazing bands to be able to do these tours with, and just being able to continue on being yourselves.
Yeah, it's been great. I mean, I think our biggest thing that we've ever done, or our smartest decision, was going independent and just being able to do whatever the hell we want. I mean, when you're on a label, you're stuck. If you don't like what the label's doing, too bad. You're stuck with them. So I think for us, in the past, we've had labels try and push and pull us certain directions, and it just didn't work. I mean, I think the proof is in the pudding, so to speak. We've been orders of magnitude more successful as an independent act from every single metric: more sales, more tours, better press, everything. Music's better, whatever you want to call it. And it's just been great. It's also really interesting, at least for us. I mean, we have a ton of friends that are in all kinds of different bands, and it's really interesting for us. I think we're one of the few bands that we know of, at least that's sort of in our peer group, that does well on both sides of the Atlantic. I mean, there's a lot of bands that do really well in Europe, and then they haven't even played North America. Some of our European friends, they're playing big festivals over in Europe, and then they've never even bothered to come to North America. Or maybe they did come to North America once, and they played some like absolutely terrible tour, and like 5 people came out. So it's really cool for us, at least, that we're seeing success in both North America and Europe.
Oh, absolutely. And when you're able to put out such quality albums like Play to Win, which of course is coming out next week, it's just like, it's great to see that throughout the entire world that you guys are getting that success. And I just imagine, you will be able to get to play those places that you haven't played before, like South America, and get to see what that metal fan base is like down there, and, just all across the world. I mean, as long as you guys are being able to keep this DIY style that is definitely showing that you can be independent and be able to really make a good name for yourselves. I mean, it's so great to see that from a musician standpoint, and I can't wait to see where you guys go next with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the music industry is totally changed these days. I mean, even compared to what it was 5 years ago, CD baby was almost a bad word in the more professional scene. But I mean, nowadays, everybody's jumping ship off labels left, right, and center. I mean, I can understand if you're an artist and you're almost an industry unto yourself. Like if you're a Taylor Swift, yeah, definitely, you probably need to be on a label because there's so much work to be done. Like I can only imagine how much work not only she has to put in, but her staff and everybody that works for her. That there's probably a ton of stuff to do. Same with a band like Metallica, but I mean, if you look at Metallica, they recently went independent themselves, and I think Metallica, for better or worse, has always sort of been a barometer of the heavy metal music industry. They've always been sort of trailblazers in many ways. I mean, look at the thrash metal scene that they kind of became the leader of, and then in the 90s they were the band that was able to kind of bridge the gap between the metal that was kind of dying off and the new grunge scene. I mean, the Black Album is like the biggest metal album of all time, and it's somehow managed to appease a lot of different kind of people. I mean, a lot of people don't like it, but at the same time, you cannot deny the success of that album. And then, when Metallica took a stand against Napster, for example, at the time, it seemed so strange, but they're a decade ahead of the industry and where it was going. I mean, they're like, hey, we need to understand and protect ourselves from these streaming and downloading. So, and then of course they've gone independent. So I think they're always a band that's been ahead of their time, at the very least, in the music business department, in the industry's end of things.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. And of course, the proof is in the pudding with that when it comes to Metallica. I mean, they're constantly always showing that they are the biggest metal band in the world, constantly playing stadiums and arenas all the time, bringing out these amazing bands and stuff like that. And they were able to get into that independent frame of mind. And it's so great to be able to see something like that, too, where a band is able to have full control over what they want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Metallica has always been a huge inspiration for us, which is, I mean, not only in their music, I mean, they have some of my favorite albums ever. I think most people would probably end up saying that. And they've just been, yeah, I mean, look at what they've been able to do. I mean, I think any musician would, the dream would be to have a career that would be as successful as Metallica's. And so for us, it was also really exciting when they did their Through the Never live DVD thing, their movie that they made, the 3D movie. We were actually the support act for those shows. We're even featured in the special features. So, I mean, they're almost like our heavy metal fairy godmother, so to speak.
Yeah, and I remember that too. I remember picking that up and being able to see you guys, and that was actually my first experience with the band was from those special features, and then I was able to discover more of what you guys were all about, and then started buying the albums and following everything that you guys were up to this point, and now being able to talk to you about such an amazing album like Play to Win, and, you know, just like seeing, especially from that point, you know, just seeing where your career has gone this far. I mean, it's just so miraculous to see that.
Yeah, it's crazy to think the long journey that the heavy metal has taken us on, and the different things we've been able to do. I mean, from playing to Metallica to playing big festivals and meeting all these different people backstage. I mean, we were hanging out with Accept, and when we just played Bang Your Head Festival this summer. And I mean, like, I remember putting on Accept albums in high school on my, like, Walkman. It was like, damn, this is amazing. And you never think that, you know, maybe 10 years later you'll be just hanging out having a beer with them. I mean, that would be absolutely unfathomable, that you'd be playing the same stage as bands like that. Or, you know, for example, we were nominated for a Juno earlier this year, which is Canada's version of the Grammy Awards. And, you know, I mean, those are reserved for bands like Nickelback or Justin Bieber, Drake, The Weeknd. You know, these are big artists. And so it's really amazing to even be considered in the, you know, spoken in the same breath as those kind of artists, in terms of, you know, you'd never think that you'd really make it that far, you know, if you asked me when I was, you know, just starting out in music. So it's really cool that we've been able to do that kind of stuff.
Oh, absolutely. And yeah, again, I imagine, you know, just with everything that's going on now, I mean, being able to continue the success that's been going on and just seeing that career trajectory just continue to rise up. I mean, I just know that things are just going to continue to keep getting bigger and better from here on out. And, you know, it's so great to see that, you know, just with this complete success that is going on right now. Of course, there's always going to be struggles, but the fact that you guys were able to take this independent mindset and just being able to really push yourselves even further and get further along than you might have ever gotten being on a big name label or whatever the case is. I mean, it's so gratifying to be able to see that, and I just know it's going to continue to keep getting bigger and better from here on out.
Well, thank you very much for the support. Yeah, I mean, that's the plan. That's what we're trying to do. So for this album, I think that our biggest difference was we actually finished recording this album around Christmas, just before Christmas. So we actually finished it about a year ago, almost. And then we just kind of sat on it because we wanted to make sure that we had everything in line for the release. So we wanted to have a tour before it released. We wanted to have a tour as it was released. We wanted to have tours after it was released. We wanted to make sure we had a great marketing team. We wanted to make sure that we had all our press organized, things like that. And it's a lot of these sort of business decisions that you don't really think of when you're making music that go a long, long way in making your band successful. And I think it's a lot of it's a lot of stuff that a label can do for you, but the unfortunate part is a lot of times the label doesn't do it for most bands. You know, they'll say they'll do it and then they don't. So And I mean, to some degree, I can sort of see why. I mean, if you're a label, I mean, times are tough for labels. You know, you have to do more and more with less and less. They have smaller staff. The staff are overworked. You know, they don't have time to work with all these bands, especially the smaller ones. So it's been huge for us to be able to be independent and work these things for ourselves, because no one is ever going to work harder for you than you will. And I think that's sort of that's been our main motto. If you want something done, do it yourself.
Oh, very much so. And I think that's a very inspiring note to be able to end on as well. So with that, thank you very much for being able to talk to me about everything going on in the world of Stryker right now. And of course, talking about the brand new album, Play to Win, coming out next Friday through Record Breaking Records. I absolutely love this album. I love this amazing streak of albums that you guys have been able to do now with 6 albums now that I just love from start to finish. And it gets me very excited to see what's going to be coming up for the next album as well. And you know, just everything that you guys have been able to do right now, being able to tour over the world right now, and hopefully more that'll continue in 2019. It was just great being able to get your insight and everything going on.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, not a problem. Before we wrap things up, is there anything else you'd like to mention that I hadn't brought up yet?
I don't think so. I think if everyone, for all your Stryker needs, check out our website, www.stryker-metal.com. We'll have tour dates, links to tickets, new videos, all that fun stuff.